Sadman the Anchoret was famed no less for his piety than for his prophetic wisdom and knowledge of the dark art of sorcery. He had dwelt alone for 2 generations in a curious house on the rim of the northern desert of Tisoon, a house whose floor and walls were built from the large bones of dromedaries and whose roof was a wattling composed of the smaller bones of wild dogs and men and hyenas. These ossuary relics, chosen for their whiteness and symmetry, were bound securely together with well-tanned thongs, and were joined and fitted with marvelous closeness, leaving no space for the blown sand to penetrate. This house was the pride of Sadman, who swept it daily with a besom of mummy's hair, till it shone immaculate as polished ivory both within and without. Despite his remoteness and reclusion, and the hardship that attended a journey to his abode, Sadman was much consulted by the people of Tisoon, and was even sought by pilgrims from the further shores of Zothique. However, though not ungracious or inhospitable, he often ignored the queries of his visitors, who, as a rule, wished merely to divine the future or to ask advice concerning the most advantageous government of their temporal affairs. He became more and more taciturn with age, and spoke little with men in his last years. It was said, perhaps not untruly, that he preferred to talk with the ever-murmuring palms about his well, or the desert-wandering stars that went over his hermitage. In the summer of Sadman's 93rd year, there came to him the youth Amozain, his great-nephew, and the son of a niece that Sadman had loved dearly in days before his retirement to the Gemosophoic seclusion. Amozain, who had spent all of his 21 years in the upland home of his parents, was on his own to Marab, the capital of Tisoon, where he would serve as a cupbearer to Fomorth the king. This post, obtained for him by influential friends of his father, was much coveted among the youth of the land, and would lead to high advancements if he were fortunate enough to win the king's favor. In accord with his mother's wish, he had come to visit Sadman and to ask the counsel of the sage regarding various problems of worldly conduct. Sadman, whose eyes were undimmed by age and astronomy and much poring over volumes of archaic ciphers, was pleased with Amozain, and found in the boy something of his mother's beauty, and for this reason he gave freely of his hoarded wisdom, and after uttering many profound and pertinent maxims, he said to Amozain, "It is indeed well that you have come to me, for innocent of the world's turpitude, you fare to a city of strange sins, and strange witcheries and sorceries. There are numerous evils in Marab. Its women are witches and harlots, and their beauty is a fallness wherein the young, the strong, the valiant are limbed and taken." Then, ere Amozain departed, Sadman gave to him a small amulet of silver, graven curiously with the mignard skeleton of a girl, and Sadman said, "I counsel you to wear this amulet at all times henceforward. It contains a pinch of ashes from the pyre of Yos Ebni, sage and archimage, who won supremacy over men and demons in elder years by defying all mortal temptation and putting down the insubordination of the flesh. There is a virtue in these ashes, and they will protect you from such evils as were overcome by Yos Ebni. And yet, peradventure, there are ills and enchantments in Marab from which the amulet cannot defend you. In such case you must return to me. I shall watch over you carefully, and shall know all that occurs to you in Marab, for I have long since become the owner of certain rare faculties of sight and hearing, whose exercise is not debarred or limited by mere distance." Amozain, being ignorant of the matters at which Sadman hinted, was somewhat bewildered by his peroration, but he received the amulet gratefully. Then, bidding Sadman a reverential farewell, he resumed his journey to Marab, wondering much as to the fortune that would befall him in that sinful and many-legended city. Fomorth, who had grown old and senile amid his debaucheries, was the ruler of an aging semi-desert land, and his court was a place of far-sought luxury, of obliquitous refinement and corruption. The youth, Amalzain, accustomed only to the simple manners, the rude virtues and vices of country-dwelling folk, was dazzled at first by the sybaritic life around him, but a certain innate strength of character, fortified by the moral teachings of his parents and the precepts of his great-uncle Sadman, preserved him from any grave errors or lapses. Thus it was that he served as a cupbearer at bacchanalian revels, but remained abstemious throughout, pouring night after night in the ruby-crusted cup of Fomorth the maddening wines that were drugged with cannabis, and the stupefying arrack with its infusion of poppy. With untainted heart and flesh he beheld the infamous mummeries whereby the courtiers, vying with each other in shamelessness, attempted to lighten the king's ennui. Feeling only wonder or disgust, he watched the nimble and lascivious contortions of black dancers from Duza Thom in the north, or saffron-bodied girls from the southern isles. His parents, who believed implicitly in the superhuman goodness of monarchs, had not prepared him for this spectacle of royal vice, but the reverence they had instilled so thoroughly into Amalzain led him to regard it all as being the peculiar but mysterious prerogative of the kings of Tassoon. During his first month in Marab, Amalzain heard much of the Princess Ulua, sole daughter of Fomorth and Queen Lunalia, but since the women of the royal family seldom attended the banquets or appeared in public, he did not see her. The huge and shadowy palace, however, was filled with whispers concerning her amours. Ulua, he was told, had inherited the sorceries of her mother Lunalia, whose dark, luxurious beauty, so often sung by bewitched poets, was now fallen to a haggish decrepitude. The lovers of Ulua were innumerable, and she often procured their passion or ensured their fidelity by other charms than those of her person. Though little taller than a child, she was exquisitely formed and endowed with the loveliness of some female demon that might haunt the slumbers of youth. She was feared by many, and her ill will was deemed a dangerous thing. Fomorth, no less blind to her sins and witcheries than he had been to those of Lunalia, indulged her in all ways and denied her nothing. Amalzain's duties left him much idle time, for Fomorth usually slept the double sleep of age and intoxication after the evening revels. Much of this time he gave to the study of algebra and the reading of olden poems and romances. One morning, while he was engaged with certain algebraic calculations, there came to Amalzain a huge negress who had been pointed out to him as one of Ulua's waiting women. She told him peremptorily that he was to follow her to the apartments of Ulua. Bewildered and amazed by this singular interruption of his studies, he was unable to reply for a moment. Thereupon, seeing his hesitation, the great black woman lifted him in her naked arms and carried him easily from the room and through the palace halls. Angry and full of discomfiture, he found himself deposited in a chamber hung with shameless designs, where, amid the fuming of aphrodisiac vapors, the princess regarded him with luxurious gravity from a couch of fire-bright scarlet. She was small as a woman of the elf folk, and voluptuous as a coiled lamia. The incense floated about her like sinuous veils. "There are other things than the pouring of wine for a sottish monarch, or the study of worm-eating volumes," said Ulua in a voice that was like the flowing of hot honey. "Sir cupbearer, your youth should have a better employment than these." "I ask no other employment," replied Amalzain. "But tell me, O princess, what is your will? Why has your serving woman brought me here in a fashion so unseemly?" "I would have you for my lover," said Ulua. Behold, my arms are the portals of untold raptures and the felicities. The pleasures I give are keener than the pangs of a fury death. The death kings of Tassoon will whisper enviously of our love to their dead queens in the immemorial granite vaults below Gangaka. The Thadian, the black, shadowy lord of hell, hearing the tale that his demons bring to him of us, will wish to become incarnate in a mortal body. The vapors mounting thickly from golden thuribles before the couch were parted with emotion as of drawn draperies, and Amozane saw that Ulua was clad only in breast cups of coral and mother of pearl, and bracelets and anklets of jet. The matters of whereof you speak are nothing to me, said the youth, untempted. Ulua laughed lightly, and the vapors undulated as if in unison with her laughter, and were shaped dimly into obscene forms. Soon you will answer otherwise, she told the youth. Few men have denied me long, and these few have regretted their refusal in the end. You may go now, but you will return to me presently, of your own accord. For many days thereafter, Amozane, going about his duties as usual, was aware of a strange haunting. It seemed now that Ulua was everywhere. Appearing at the revels as if by some new caprice, she flaunted her evil beauty in the eyes of the young cupbearer, and often by day he met her in the palace gardens and corridors. All men spoke of her, as if conspiring tacitly to keep her in his thoughts, and it seemed that even the heavy harasses whispered her name as they rustled in the lost winds that wandered through the gloomy and interminable halls. This, however, was not all, for her undesired image began to trouble his nightly dreams, and awakening he heard the warm, dulcet languor of her voice, and felt the caress of light and subtle fingers in the darkness. Peering at the pale moon that waxed beyond the windows, above the black cypresses, he saw her dead, corroded face assume the living features of Ulua. The lithe and mignard form of the young witch appeared to move among the fabulous queens and goddesses that thronged the opulent hangings with their armors. Beheld as if through enchantment, her voice leaned beside his in the mirrors, and she came and vanished, phantom-like, with seductive murmurs and wanton gestures, as he bent over his books. But though he was perturbed by these appearances, in which he could scarce distinguish the real from the illusory, Amozane was still indifferent toward Ulua, being surely protected from her charms by the amulet containing the ashes of Yos Ebony, saint and sage and archimage. From certain curious flavors detected more than once in his food and drink, he suspected that the love potions for which she had become infamous were being administered to him, but beyond a light and passing qualmishiousness, he experienced no ill effect whatever, and he was wholly ignorant of the spells woven against him in secret, and the thrice legal invocations that were designed to wound his heart and senses. Now, though he knew it not, his indifference was a matter of much gossip at the court. Men marveled greatly at such exemption for all whom the princess had chosen heretofore, whether captains, cupbearers, or high dignitaries, or common soldiers and grooms, had yielded easily to her bewitchments. So it came to pass that Ulua was angered, since all men knew that her beauty was scorned by Amozane, and her sorcery was impotent to ensnare him. Thereupon she ceased to appear at the revels of Amorth. Amozane beheld her no longer in the halls and gardens, and neither his dreams nor his waking hours were haunted any more by the spell-wrought semblance of Ulua. So, in his innocence, he rejoiced as one who has encountered a grave peril and has come forth unharmed. Then later, on a certain night, as he lay sleeping tranquilly in the moonless hours before dawn, there came to him in his dream a figure muffled from crown to heel with the investments of a tomb. Tall as a caryatid, awful and menacing, it leaned above him in silence more malignant than any curse, and the cerements fell open at the breast, and charnel worms and the death scarabs and scorpions, together with Shreds of rotting flesh rained down upon Amalzane. Then, as he awoke from his nightmare, sick and stifled, he breathed a carrion fetor and felt against him the pressure of a still, heavy body. Affrighted, he rose and lit the lamp, but the bed was empty, yet the odor of putrefaction still lingered, and Amalzane could have sworn that the corpse of a woman, 2 weeks dead and teeming with maggots, had lain closely at his side in the darkness. Thereafter, for many nights, his slumber were broken by such foulness as this. Hardly could he sleep at all for the horror of that which came and went, invisible but palpable in his chamber. Always he awoke from ill dreams, to find about him the stiffened arms of long-dead succubi, or to feel at his side the amorous trembling of fleshless skeletons. He was choked by the natron and bitumen of mummied breasts. He was crushed by the unremoving weight of gigantic wishes. He was kissed nauseously by lips that were oozing tatters of corruption. Nor was this all, for other abominations came to him by day, visible and perceived through all his senses, and more loathsome even than the dead. Things that seemed as the leavings of leprosy crawled before him at high noon in the halls of Amorth, and they rose up from the shadows and sidled toward him, leering whitely with faces that were no longer faces, and trying to caress him with their half-eaten fingers about his ankles as he went to and fro. There clung lascivious impusae, with breasts that were furred like the bat, and serpent-bodied lamae, minced and pyruded before his eyes, like the dancers before the king. No longer could he read his books or solve his problems of algebra in peace, for the letters changed from moment to moment beneath his scrutiny, and were twisted into runes of evil meaning, and the signs and ciphers he had written were turned into devils no bigger than large emets that writhed fully across the papers as if on a field, performing those rites which are acceptable only to Ulua, queen of perdition, and goddess of all iniquities. Thus plagued and bed-shevelled, the youth Amalzane was near to madness, yet he dared not complain or speak to others of aught that he beheld, for he knew that these horrors were immaterial or substantial, were perceived only by himself. Nightly, for the full period of a moon, he lay with dead things in his chamber, and daily, in all his comings and goings, he was besought by abhorrent spectres, and he doubted not that all these were the sendings of Ulua, angered by his refusal of her love, and he remembered that Sadman had hinted darkly of certain enchantments from which the ashes of Yosemite, preserved in a silver amulet, might be powerless to defend him, and knowing that such enchantments were upon him now, he recalled the final injunction of the old archimage. So, feeling that there was no help for him save in the wizardry of Sadman, he went before King Famorth and begged a short leave of absence from the court, and Famorth, who was well pleased with the cupbearer, and moreover had begun to note his thinness and pallor, granted the request readily. Mounted on a palfrey chosen for speed and endurance, Amalzane rode northward from Marad on a sultry morning in autumn. A strange heaviness had stilled all the air, and great coppery clouds were piled like towering many-domed palaces of genii on the desert hills. The sun appeared to swim in molten brass. No vultures flew on the silent heavens, and the very jackals had retired to their lairs as if in fear of some unknown doom. But Amalzane, riding swiftly towards Sadman's hermitage, was haunted still by leprous larvae that rose before him, posturing fully on the dune sands, and he heard the desirous moaning of succubi under the hooves of his horse. The night waylaid him, airless and starless, as he came to a well amid dying palms. Here he lay sleepless, with the curse of Ulua still upon him, for it seemed that the dry, dusty leashes of desert dooms reclined rigidly at his side, and bony fingers wooed him toward the unfathomable sandpits from which they had risen. Weary and devil-ridden, he reached the wattled house of Sadman at noon of the next day. The sage greeted him affectionately, showing no surprise, and listened to his story with the air of one who hearkens a twice-told tale. "These things and more were known to me from the beginning," he said to Amalzain. "I could have saved you from the sending of Ulua ere now, but it was my wish that you should come to me at this time, forsaking the court of the dotard Fomorth and the evil city of Marab, whose iniquities are now at the full. The imminent doom of Marab, though unread by her astrologers, has been declared in the heavens, and I would not that you should share the doom. It is needful," he went on, "that the spells of Ulua should be broken on this very day, and the sendings returned to her that sent them, since otherwise they would haunt you forever, remaining as a visible and tangible plague when the witch herself has gone to her black lord, the Satan, in the seventh hell." Then, to the wonderment of Amalzain, the old magician brought forth from a cabinet of ivory an elliptic mirror of dark and burnished metal and placed it before him. The mirror was held aloft by the muffled hands of a veiled image, and peering within it, Amalzain saw neither his own face nor the face of Sadman, nor aught of the room itself reflected, and Sadman enjoined him to watch the mirror closely, and then repaired to a small oratory that was curtained off from the chamber with long and queerly painted rolls of camel parchment. Watching the mirror, Amalzain was aware that certain of the sendings of Ulua still came and went beside him, striving ever to gain his attention with the unclean gestures such as harlots use. But resolutely he fixed his eyes on the void and unreflecting metal, and anon he heard the voice of Sadman chanting without pause the powerful words of an antique formula of exorcism, and now from between the oratory curtains there issued the intolerable pugnancy of burning spices, such as are employed to drive away demons. Then Amalzain perceived, without lifting his eyes from the mirror, that the sendings of Ulua had all vanished like vapors blown away by the desert wind, but in the mirror a scene limned itself darkly, and he seemed to look on the marble towers of the city of Marab beneath the overlooming bastions of ominous cloud. Then the scene shifted, and he saw the palace hall where Fomorth nodded in wine-stained purple, seen now and drunken amid his ministers and sycophants. Again the mirror changed, and he beheld a room with tapestries of shameless design, where on a couch of fire-bright crimson the Princess Ulua sat with her latest lovers amid the fuming of golden thuribles. Marveling as he peered within the mirror, Amalzain witnessed a strange thing, for the vapors of the thuribles, mounting thickly and voluminously, took from instant to instant the form of those very apparitions by which he had been bedeviled so long. Ever they rose and multiplied till the chamber teemed with the spawn of hell and the vomitings of the riven charnel betwixt Ulua and the lover at her right hand, who was a captain of the king's guard. There coiled a monstrous lamia, enfolding them both in its serpentine volumes and crushing them with its human bosom, and close at her left hand appeared a half-eating corpse, glaring with lipless teeth, from whose cerements worms were sifted upon Ulua and her second lover, who was a royal equerry, and swelling like the fumes of some witch's vat. Those other abominations pressed about the couch of Ulua with obscene mouthings and fingerings. At this, like the mark of a hellish branding, horror was printed on the features of the captain and the equerry, and a terror rose in the eyes of Ulua like a pale flame ignited in sunless pits, and her breast shuddered beneath the breast cups. And now, in a trice, the mirrored room began to rock violently, and the censers were overturned on the tilting flags, and the shameless hangings shook and bellied like the blown sails of a vessel in storm. Great cracks appeared in the floor, and beside the couch of Ulua a chasm deepened swiftly, and then widened from wall to wall. The whole chamber was riven asunder, and the princess and her two lovers, with all her loathly sendings about them, were hurled tumultuously into the chasm. After that the mirror darkened, and Amalzain beheld for a moment the pale towers of Marab tossing and falling on heaven's black as adamant. The mirror itself trembled, and the veiled image of metal supporting it began to totter and seem about to fall, and the walled house of Sadman shook in the passing earthquake, but being stoutly built, stood firm while the mansions and palaces of Marab went down in ruin. When the earth had ceased its long trembling, Sadman issued from the oratory. "It is needless to moralize on what has happened," he said. "You have learned the true nature of carnal desire, and have likewise beheld the history of mundane corruption. Now, being wise, you will turn early to those things which are incorruptible and beyond the world." Thereafter, till the death of Sadman, Amozain dwelt with him, and became his only pupil in the science of the stars and the hidden arts of enchantment and sorcery.